Hello, and welcome to the final webinar of this year. I'm Maureen McCarthy, the Associate Director of Advancement and Best Practices at the Council of Graduate Schools. And joining us today is the Director of Challenge Grants, Katya Zelyat.
Hi, everyone.
So we're excited to have a conversation with you, a sort of a wrap-up conversation about wrap-up for the planning grantees, I guess. A wrap-up conversation about lessons learned. I'd really like to have this be an opportunity for you to share with your colleagues what kinds of things you have learned over this past year, whether you're planning or implementation grantee. And also, we want to talk a little bit about what to expect from the next phase solicitation from NEH, and also about how your plans for sustaining this work beyond the grant period, especially, or basically considering whether or not you receive a next phase grant, how you're thinking about sustaining this work. So that is what's on the agenda for today, and if there's other things that you'd like to talk about or other questions that you have, we're happy to bring those into the mix. So just as a reminder for everyone, we have our audio troubleshooting slides. And so if you have a comment or a question, which I hope you all will at some point today, please use the raise your hand function on the control panel, or type in your question into the question box and we'll read it out loud for you. So we'll get started. One thing I wanted to mention to everyone is that so we have, Kim, are you purposely raising your hand, or do you have, oh, no, okay, great. So,
see whether other people, or is that all the people there?
That's all.
Oh, okay.
So one thing I wanted to mention to you all is that through my role as coordinating the consortium, one of my tasks is to produce a document for NEH that summarizes lessons learned from the consortium. And I have started drafting that document, and I've made some recommendations to NEH with regard to what a next phase solicitation should include, or be thinking about considering as they draft that. But I'd also really like to hear from all of you about some of the kind of major takeaways that you feel you have gleaned from this year that I could include in this document. Hopefully I'll have a chance to review your white papers, but I think it also would be helpful just to hear from you what the major successes or failures that you feel you achieved this year, and what you feel like others coming after you could really learn from those experiences. I am also putting together a kind of a lit review of prior work in this area, so kind of very narrowly tailored to think about broad professional development for humanities PhDs. What has been done in this area, and as I go back through the archives and back through reports and things, it's amazing to me really the long history of this work, and how different this moment in time feels as compared to in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s or the early aughts, when there were select handfuls of people paying attention to the need for these kinds of broader training programs, or broader integration of the idea of public scholarship into programs, but that really, it feels like we're at a different moment right now. So just be on the lookout for those documents that will be coming out of CGS at some point, probably I'm guessing in the fall is actually when we'll be releasing these, when I return from maternity leave. So that's the other kind of news, I guess, is that I am expecting my second child in about a month. And so I will be gone from CGS for 3 months while I'm home with the new baby. So
congratulations, Maureen.
Thank you. Yes, it's very exciting, but I also wanted to just give you a heads up that I won't be able to respond to email during that time. So, and I don't have I don't have actual dates yet because I'm just working up until I can't work anymore. So, but basically roughly from mid-July to mid-October, I will most likely be out of the office. So that's just a general announcement. So, I would really like to hear from you. Hopefully you've had a little bit of time as I'm talking on and on to think about what your kind of key takeaways are from this year. So I don't know.
I mean, the other thing, this is Katya, the other thing is that if you are the author of or are continuous present authoring your white paper, some of those sections might be relevant, what's worked, what has not worked, to this conversation, to share as you are writing. I think we've received one white paper, so many of you are still in process, and if you'd like to talk to your peers who are also writing at this point in time, it might be a good way to exchange ideas. But in the absence of any hands, because we don't really see any at this point, I think...
Oh, here.
Wait, hold on.
Brennan is going to contribute. Great. Okay, great. Brennan, go right ahead.
So are we saying things that we've learned? Is that...
Yeah.
Okay. One of the main things is I think when we started reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce, to businesses, to NGOs, all of them were very interested. And I think we were very timid in that and had imagined our main focus being inward. And we're kind of surprised at how quickly people were willing to talk with us and pretty quickly start throwing out numbers and possibilities. So that's one of the main takeaways that we had.
Brennan, can I ask you back at you, has that external validation helped you internally?
I think certainly for the main planning group, because that encouraged all of us to start talking to our friends at the CDC or working in other places in Atlanta. I think as we move forward and we start getting these things in place, a lot of the struggle we had was just not having the infrastructure to make this happen, and so we had to get we went through the Department of English and got a course hours approved for graduate students to do an internship. We had to figure out MOUs and that sort of thing, and we've had a lot of help, but I think until we had that in place, we haven't been able to finalize anything, but we're, I think, right about to. And so I think once that happens, that will encourage us to do more. And as more students take those possibilities, the hope is that this will kind of snowball with faculty seeing that students they're working with are trying this out. And so, we'll see. That's where we are right now.
Okay, I was thinking particularly about administration and kind of higher ups beyond the departmental level being swayed by corporations and other external partners in giving you some structural support or money because they see that maybe these other partners are going to be bringing in some money to this effort.
The main, I mean, we certainly have had help from and participation from I guess, the provost, the associate provost for grad studies, someone in arts and sciences who's in charge of grad studies. They've been very helpful in setting up, showing us models from other disciplines, working on the MOUs. So we've gotten help from them, and there is hope that at the college we might hire someone who more focuses on graduate internships, but not really money thrown directly to students at this point, or to departments at this point.
Great. Thanks, Brennan.
Thank you. Brendan, is there anything that maybe hasn't worked so well that you have kind of learned not to do?
I think I tend to, and maybe some of the others that I work with tend to take on too much and try everything. And so, I think we set our goals too high. We want things to move too quickly, and that can be frustrating sometimes. I think also they're recognizing that there is a culture problem. I think at Georgia State it is maybe less of a culture problem than some of the other schools, or many of the other schools, but ours is more, no one is intending to shun grad students for looking outside of the university, getting a job, but it's still very much rooted in the culture of grad students, and just the fact that faculty just don't have this experience. They just don't have experience outside of the university, and so while they want to be supportive for the most part and have been vocal in wanting that, they feel kind of useless or unqualified to help in any way. And so that, I think, is one of the big barriers that we need to deal with, is not that people are actively against this, that both graduate students and faculty are interested in what we've been working on and see possible solutions, but they don't see what their role is in that solution. So I think that's a big hurdle for us.
Thank you very much for sharing. It looks like Ken would like to talk next about what they have learned at FIU. So thank you, Brennan. I'm unmuting you now, Ken. Oh, you're self-muted. There you go.
Did I do it? Yeah. So I had to switch to my iPhone because my computer decided to not cooperate with the software this time. So you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. We are also writing and almost finished now the white paper. In fact, this is probably the last step before we finalize it, is to attend this webinar. I think almost everything Brendan said resonates pretty closely with our experiences, so nothing perhaps original to add. I think we did start with a more, at least I thought, of a more external focus, and if anything, actually my co-PIs and some of what we learned as we went pulled us to do more within, so we actually added some steps to engage with faculty and students even more than the original proposal. But the outside focus definitely reinforced the sense that there's lots of potential employers or industries or job categories that could be very interested in humanities PhDs. I think probably the biggest takeaway, at least in terms of an immediate thing, would be we have to find a way to get graduate students, maybe faculty as well, to come up with the right medium and language to translate the skills of the humanist into the categories that employers want. And I think it's largely a communications. It's not 100%. There's some experiences that need to be added, some skills, but a surprising amount, I think, is finding a way to communicate in other realms that that either faculty or students are trained to do. So that's probably one of the most immediate things that we came away with. The other is, I think, as well, that faculty are a little scared about what they're going to be asked to do to make this happen, and I think the kind of again immediate takeaway is that that not only can we not pile on more work for graduate students, that we have to figure out ways to do this without adding to their existing work, or at least we have to modify that work to accommodate this, but that faculty as well don't want to feel like now they have to wear yet another hat or take on another task, or so whether that means getting them help or training, or maybe that does require some resources from the university to provide personnel to do that, or what. But that's certainly a concern within. That's something that resonated, I think.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So can you tell us, when you talk about giving students language to translate their experience and skills into something that employers will understand, have you developed any resources to help students do that, or is that just sort of something you've noted that needs to happen, or where are you in that process?
So, I mean, of course, we only did the planning stage. So, I think we're one thing we want to do, although I don't think this will be the answer, is to engage more with the career office people. And some more generic things perhaps could come out of that. They, even as simple as, the simplest is to write a resume that's not an academic resume. But the harder things, I think, are, being able to speak, precisely and relatively directly to job concerns, right? And thinking about, here's a job that doesn't say, we want a historian. It says we want X. Well, we believe that historians bring certain skills in terms of processing information, reading texts, understanding complex processes, but there has to be certain language that will convey that. And I don't know. I mean, that may be where I think things like internships, and one thing we do want to do is bring in more external, non-academic speakers, whether they're alums who have found jobs outside of the university environment, or whether they're people in various capacities who have humanities backgrounds. I think that would be a good starting point, would be to have graduate students see someone who is in some sense a humanist, but doing something not academic, and just hear them talk about, well, how did you get started? What did your history degree do for you? I think that's probably the first step beyond some generic sort of job application skills.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say thanks, Ken, that it's so interesting because these questions of skills and training are often reducible to a vocabulary that a specific type of sphere has, and a vocabulary that academia has, and the hierarchies that individuals associate with those two vocabulary universes. And so thinking about one's activities in essentially maybe even two different languages should be a skill that many humanists can understand. But I think when there's a hierarchy between those languages, it becomes difficult. And so, I mean, it's been my experience as a humanist in the world that I talk about my academic experiences very differently, using different words than I would in the academy, and not judging myself about those words and not expecting others to judge me based on those words. So I think working with the notion of vocabularies and having different even language systems for the different things that you intend to do is something that people need to understand is all right.
It's a good way to put it, I think. Yeah. I don't know if my colleague Jessica, I think, is also on the webinar, might have also insights if you want to continue that part of the conversation.
Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Hello, am I unmuted?
You are.
You are.
Okay, I don't want to, this is actually, my additional comment has nothing to do specifically with FIU, but just a general observation that might apply to universities that are state universities with PhD programs. One thing that we found in our conversations with our students is that their goal overwhelmingly when they come to graduate school for a PhD is to become professors. And in spite of their building awareness about the challenges involved in that career path, they remain pretty determined to achieve that goal. And so something that's been surprising to me in this process and thought-provoking is, you know, it's not just faculty members who have to adapt their understanding of reality, but we're placed in this very uncomfortable position of having to, I guess, deal with the notion that the market is also, you know, obviously it's not ideal for these graduate students who come in with very real goals. And so I think we're faced with this question of, are we supposed to sit down from day one, as we've all talked about doing, so that our students adjust and adapt their expectations and their actions, but in the process we're actually, you know, we have to be careful not to rip the rug out from under them in terms of their aspirations. I mean, they very much come to our programs with the goals that we are now saying are in many cases unobtainable. And the second thing I just wanted to add, given the conversation about resume writing, is just that MLA Commons site that you referred us to and that's been, you know, in the Chronicle and elsewhere, has a really useful tool that I'm sure others have already seen that gives, you know, it's like got a few pages on language to use in resumes. There's a one-pager on building a resume. There's a ton of resources on that site that could be the actual you know, the summary, the summaries of what we're all trying to articulate for our students. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Jessica, this is Katya. Thank you so much for the comment about students. And I think that certainly will resonate with many of the people on the webinar. And then I know that I've talked to hundreds of people about this very same issue. Mm-hmm. And I think there are multiple vectors meeting here, but one of the most important facts is that up until now, departments and in some cases individual professors, and if not that, then schools, but usually it's departments and individual professors, are the ones who are picking the graduate students. Mm. So admissions, a moment of an admit and wanting to have someone come to study with you is the moment at which you can think about what type of student you want and what type of student wants you. And I think that is a moment that people should be considering very seriously in this new next gen universe. It doesn't mean that you need to accept fewer students, but maybe given the profile of any of the universities that are in NextGen, or even any of the universities that have humanities PhD programs, think about the type of student you would like to be teaching for the world that awaits them, and that you have the power to control the people who come to you to a certain extent by extending offers to them. And that really very real point in time is how you think of your program, how you market your program to potential graduate students, how you cultivate a community of potential graduate students, and what type of people you admit. So I think that is something that really needs to be kept in mind, and I think that that's going to probably feature in some way in our next beta NextGen, because we found, particularly at the project directors meeting, that this was something that a lot of people were thinking about, because they do see that students, quote unquote, still think that they're going to become professors. Data and emotions not aside, but involved in this process. So I think admissions is really one of the most important moments.
Yeah. Right.
Just,
yeah, good point.
Yeah, if I can still speak.
Yeah.
Yes, that's something I think we thought of as well. And I will say that that was an area that somewhat surprising, maybe only because we hadn't fully thought it out when we started. We got some pushback from the faculty, who perhaps interpreted that. Now, maybe we need to think about how to say it as we're going to accept students who are somehow lower skilled on the history skill scale or something. So that surprisingly could be a trickier move than you might think right off the top of your head. I'm not saying it's impossible, but just we did have some resistance to that idea when we sort of muted it. So,
what specifically would that mean? Or, I guess I would be curious to have those conversations and sort of probe that assumption a little bit about, that admitting students who don't say that all they want to do is be professors, therefore means admitting students who aren't as skilled. That seems to correlate to me.
Right. It does. You wouldn't think it does, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it in the abstract. I think it means, and admittedly, this was just based on some survey and of the faculty and some kind of like general conversations, focus group type work we did with them. I think right now the kind of reaction is one of it's very clear what you need to be, what you look for in a good historian, and now you're telling us we have to not look at those things but look at other things. So part of it's just I think people don't know what that would mean, and then part of it is the assumption that good historians, in this case, right, historians are going to be sacrificed to people who maybe have really, I don't know, maybe are very clever, entrepreneurial skills or something like that. And so part of it is I think we have to really define, exactly what it means to look for a difference, right? I mean, it could be as simple as, we're going to really make people say up front, how they see their career going, and think about people who are more open to a variety of career options and put some weight on that, right? It might be as simple as that, but I wonder if people are afraid that instead of producing really good, say, historians, we're going to produce, I don't know, other types of people, and they don't want to work with those types of people, so.
Interesting.
I don't want to speak too much for the
right. Well, I'd be curious to hear whether other people have done some thinking in the area of admissions, or if they have had, some additional conversations with faculty, or any sort of solutions or ideas about how maybe to approach this issue. Kevin, you're welcome to continue adding your thoughts, but if not, I'm going to mute you.
Go ahead.
All right. So, it's interesting that the issue. I'm going to wait for someone to volunteer to talk, So far, no one has volunteered. But while we're waiting, I have been thinking about admissions for a long time. A long time for me. Over the I think it was in 2015, CGS did a project on holistic review in graduate admissions, and as we sort of worked our way through that project, I was really struck by how kind of probing into any one of these areas, admissions or career, professional development or doctoral learning outcomes, they're all so integrated and so intertwined that it's almost that you have to really be thinking about all of those things at any given moment, degree requirements and how seminars are structured and what sorts of things you're asking of students and what your expectations are for the dissertation, and all of that is all tied up together, and also inclusive in there is of how you think about diversity and inclusion and access, and so it gets really complicated really quickly, and I understand how this may not be something with a simple solution, but I do think it is important to think about the admissions moment when we talk about next-gen issues.
I think I agree that it's very complicated, and however, I think that among all of those factors that you just talked about, admissions might be one of the easier lifts, because you're talking about, in many cases, in most cases, not a lot of people. You're not admitting, classes of 150.
Right.
And it's a very person-to-person question. And it has a really long-term impact. And so I'm just thinking about how NEH came up with the NextGen grant was to look at the entire life cycle of the humanities in all spheres, public and academic, and see the one pressure point where it might be feasible to make some kind of change, and that was in graduate education, not in undergraduate education, not in tenure and promotion, not in K-12 or pre-K or elder hostel learning. This is the moment, and I'm beginning to think throughout this year, after having talked to many people, that admissions might be the most the easiest lift on trying to start to make some cultural change, because it is one by one by one rather than entire system change all at once.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it doesn't look like anyone has anything to add on this issue, so I actually think we might be better served moving on to, if maybe Katja, you could tell us a little bit about NEH's plans for this next phase solicitation, just so everyone knows kind of what to expect, what is coming down the pike, and then we can talk a little bit about sustainability.
Sure. I kind of like calling it solicitation because I imagine myself in high heels and a boa walking down 7th Street Southwest, which is so not my reality, also in this 95-degree heat. Whew. So we have defined the next deadline as November 29th, 2017, so that's shortly after Thanksgiving. That will go to, that deadline will allow applications to be looked at in March Council, so that people would know about whether the grant has been recommended or not in early April. And we've done this timeline so that it would give everyone ample time to start really either a planning grant, so not any of you, but maybe some of your friends in other places, or probably what would be more relevant for you, an implementation grant in the fall of 2018. So the things that I know at this point, not having read all of your white papers, which will be really important for the rewriting of the guidelines. The things that I know now are we will be able to provide funding to organizations that can raise a third-party non-federal match. So the language that we had in the previous solicitation about cost sharing and institutional monies will not exist in the new guidelines. It will all be third-party match, which means donors, corporate monies going toward this project, foundation monies going toward this project. There's also a possibility of figuring out how to change unrestricted to restricted funding, but it can't be money that your university already has that it repackages for this project. And this is not something really new. This is a stipulation of the type of funding that challenge grants has from the Department of the Treasury. So we need to honor that commitment to support projects on at least a one-to-one basis with these third-party matching funds. So that means that our grant amounts are going to probably look slightly different. So for the planning, we might have a one-to-one match, which is a range instead of an absolute amount, and we will have that for implementation as well. So in thinking about applying for implementation this summer, what I would counsel everyone to do is think about support from a variety of different sources outside of the university. And I'm very happy to talk to everyone about what exactly that might mean in your specific case. But this is, I think, where a lot of you, if you have worked to develop some non-academic alumni networks, will be that effort will serve you in good stead, because that might actually be a pool to look at to help you with this third-party match. And I think that that would be a wonderful outcome, because that group of people would feel extremely interested in helping others of their ilk. And then, of course, there are the traditional foundations that we all know support this type of work, and some of you have had help from those foundations. I think there's also a really great opportunity to reach out to corporate partners to whom you might not have connected previously, and a way to integrate internship opportunities for your students at corporate partners in the way that these corporations might make donations to the university for this project, as a way to fund the internship programs. So that's a very bureaucratic thing, but it also has implications for how you're going to structure your budget, which is, of course, at the heart of what you're doing. I think we will be taking a good look at the implementation guidelines and setting up some probably a little bit more narrow focus on what has worked in the 3 implementation grants that we have given, but also thinking about what types of of projects you've all been working on in planning grants and what has the best likelihood of success, so that it won't be perhaps as open-ended as the last time, but maybe concentrating on a variety of areas. I think in an implementation grant, any more than really 5, and I'm thinking 3 might even be a better number, 3 to 5 big building blocks for what you're planning to implement is plenty. You know, if you have an implementation grant application with 17 different things that you want to do, that's definitely going to not be possible. So 3 to 5, and I think those 3 to 5 for all of you planners out there must have come out of what you learned in the planning process. And I think for different institutions that's going to be different. But the more evidence you have that this is the right way to go for your institution, namely any data that you might have collected over the course of the planning grant, any qualitative, even anecdotal information on these areas will be essential to this application to show that you've really done the work, that you know these are going to be the right things for your institution. And they certainly will differ from institution to institution. Finally, I think talking to your peers in the consortium is really a great way of connecting what you're doing. It might be, I mean, I don't know how feasible this is for anyone, but there might be the possibility to do joint applications, either geographically or thematically. So that might be another way of thinking about applying to this next phase. In terms of the guidelines, we predict that they might appear around the end of August, early September. I can't promise that. There currently is quite a bit going on in the infrastructure of the NEH, so I can't really promise that at all, but we will be working as hard as we can during the month of July after your white papers to really create the guidelines and put them up as quickly as we can, so that you have a good amount of time in the fall semester to make the best application possible.
I have a clarifying question, Katya, about the match, the third-party match guidelines. Is that the kind of thing where if you have an existing external grant or from say the Mellon Foundation, that is a multi-year kind of commitment that you've already gotten from at your institution, would that count, or would it have to be a new third-party funds coming in that are specifically sort of related to the project?
Well, both. I would say for an existing Mellon grant or for existing grant from a foundation, you would have to make sure that the purpose of that grant is extremely closely aligned, if not overlapping, with the implementation plan that you have.
Right.
So you couldn't use Mellon money for public humanities internships if public humanities internships are not one of the things that you want to do in implementation.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. So that is a really good thing to be thinking about. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Katya about this next round? Yes, somebody does. Let's see who it is. Ken. Well, you are self-muted. There you go.
Okay. believe it or not, I'm already thinking about the budget. Just to be clear, Katja, is the match, is it a one-to-one match, or is it? I heard two different things and I wasn't sure. So
One-to-one. We need $1 for every dollar.
At least $1 for every dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
If you want to raise 20 for every dollar, good on you, Ken.
I'd love to. Yeah. No, that's fine. Thanks.
Looks like everyone else thinks that's crystal clear, and they're very excited. Oh, here we go. Brennan. Go ahead, Brennan.
Hey, so with the matching funds, our Student Innovation Fellowship program, it's centered around a lot of large projects that partially, these graduate students are working on, and the more funds we get for these projects, the more non-GRA, GTA funding we can provide for those students. Is that something that would be considered matching, kind of the growing of these projects that would grow the opportunities for these students to work on these types of projects?
I don't exactly know what you mean by what you've just said, because I don't know what GRA, GTA is.
Graduate Research Assistant and Graduate Teaching Assistant.
That was one of the main things in the NEH call for this round of proposals, was figuring out different models for funding graduate students beyond teaching and the standard researchers.
I see. Sorry, GRA, sorry. Brennan, ask your question again.
Okay, I'll be more specific. So let's say we got a night grant to work on the ATL Maps platform. The ATL Maps platform is much broader than the specific NEH call, but many of the workers on that project would be graduate students in the humanities and from the SIF program, and so it would allow us to hire more humanities grad students on these projects in that type of position that was not teaching or research focused.
Yeah, I think that would be a tough call, because one would want to know that this is something that maybe we should talk about offline, but it prefigures what the graduate students can do. They can only work on the ATL Maps project, right? So if there are graduate students who want to do something different than GRA, GTA work, but have no interest in ATL Maps, but are still interested in career opportunities beyond the professoriate, that limits what they can do. So I think there might be some creativity in how we think about that money.
Well, and I'm pretty creative, so and the whole idea, and half of our, I guess, NEH pitch was this program, and so what it would allow us to do is hire more grad students to work on other projects, because the funding would be, basically it would be maneuvering funding to hire more students to work on more projects.
Yeah, but you'd have to prove that the money is not internal university money, but it's coming from the outside.
Right.
And I think, the implementation grant for all planners should be a refinement, but could be a refinement, but could also be substantially different from your planning grant. So I wouldn't say that your planning grant is, I think the results of what you learn in your planning grant are going to affect what happens in the implementation grant, but the two should not look the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Brennan.
Thank you.
So there are no more hands raised and no questions at this point. Oh, Denise. Go ahead, Denise.
Yes, hi. So I'm Denise Davidson. I'm one of Brennan's co-PIs at Georgia State. And I'm wondering, I think you referred to this.
Denise, it's hard to hear you. Could you speak up?
Sure. Is that better?
Not much.
Huh. I'm not quite sure what to do about that.
Okay.
Well, maybe put your face right next to the microphone.
Yeah, I have my computer. My laptop is literally on my shoulders.
Okay.
I can type.
No, I think
no, that's fine.
It's okay. We can hear you.
So I'm wondering if you will be preparing a list of other granting organizations or institutions that have expressed an interest in supporting the kind of work that the Next Generation PhD grants are supporting, because I'm kind of at a loss of even thinking about where to start to find this third-party matching.
Yeah, I think that I'll work with Maureen to do that. This is where I think your particular localities and individual relationships are going to serve you in the best stead, because really nationally there are not a huge amount of organizations that support these types of activities, and I think we've mentioned all of them: Luce, Mellon, Whiting to a certain extent, but not directly. Knight. There might be some others that are more arts based, but that's pretty much the sum total of the big ones. If you can figure out how Ford or Rockefeller or Kellogg or some of these others figure in, that's why your local institutions or your alumni connections to either institutions or to corporations or business or even private donations will stand you in good stead.
Yeah.
Right. Again, I'm kind of struggling to think about even approaching an organization or a corporation. I mean, certainly we have alumni we could contact and ask them to inquire about this, but I mean, we've had, as Brennan was saying, we've had incredible success when we've approached businesses and nonprofit organizations about internships, but that's asking them for money to pay students to do work they need done.
Right, but so
you're
what
not
I'm
talking
saying,
about that now, right?
Right, but what I'm saying is, you go to an organization and you say to them, would you like our students? They say, yes, we can't wait for your students to come. We will pay them to do an internship. And you say, great, can you pay the university what you would have paid that student to go toward this program? And that's a third-party match.
So internships would count if the funding goes through the university rather than directly to the student.
Yes, but I would never call it an internship on the budget line, right? It's a donation from that corporation or whatever entity is given to you to the university for this program.
Okay.
And that's where I think what really needs to happen is that you need to talk very specifically and pointedly and enthusiastically to your development office about how this is going to work and how important it is going to be for the development office to cultivate these new types of relationships. Because I've heard in the field that sometimes development offices are complicated in that way, but you need to get them on your side, because this is also going to impact what I think in the remaining time we might be talking about, the sustainability. Because, you know, I'm loath to say it, but we're living in very uncertain times, and I think that providing sustainability for your next-gen programs, if you think that this is an important aspect of graduate education moving forward, is going to also have to be the responsibility of the communities that you live in and the universities in which you work. And they're going to have to look for interesting new ways to fund these programs. I mean, even if they don't become next-gen programs. So I think it's a really great moment to try and start making those connections.
So I was just curious to know whether anyone has given thought to how this work will be sustained in the presence or the absence of an implementation grant. I mean, one of the issues is that your grant periods, I think, end at the end of July, is that right? And the implementation grants don't begin until fall 2018. So even if you were to be awarded an implementation grant at this point, there is a gap of about a year where there would be no funding, or no external funding from NEH at least. And so I'm curious to know what kinds of plans you have in place for continuing this work and maybe ensuring that all the things that you put in place this year don't just die on the vine, basically.
Yeah, and I think that will be probably an important component of what we look at to see, okay, well, all activities stopped when the grant period ended. Right. How serious is this university about what they're doing? Mm-hmm. Crickets. Yep. Interesting.
Nobody has any plans. Well, if you haven't thought about this yet, I think now is a good time to start. Yeah, and okay, there's a question. Amanda has a question. At UC Irvine, we were clear from the beginning of the NextGen process that we wanted to have a plan that could be implemented based on what would work for our campus regardless of NEH implementation grant. We have 3 sets of recommendations. 1, those that can be implemented now with current resources. 2, those that need additional resources. And 3, those that need discussion. I think that is a great
that's a great plan.
Way to structure it, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think since the planning money was primarily to have conversations and pay people for their time in most cases, or organize events with speakers, you all did a lot of different types of things, but a lot of it was a lot of talking. Mm-hmm. There is the feasibility of continuing to have those conversations. I mean, you should be having those conversations. Mm-hmm. Next year, even with no money, you can eat a bagel next to another person and talk about next-gen ideas without anyone's money. Yeah. So please continue doing that, even if you don't have any kind of structured support. And if you don't have structured support, indicate that that's not feasible for you at this point, but that you're working toward it, and that you're continuing these conversations if you want to apply for an implementation grant. Mm-hmm. I think just saying that you're part of this movement and that you're continuing to make these ideas circulate around your campus is really, really the most important part of what NextGen is about.
And if you want to have some conversations about, as Katya said, ways to think through, I think ways to think through that third-party match are also really kind of ways to think through a sustainability plan, right? If you do need additional resources to do the work that needs to be done, then really those conversations should be happening regardless of the requirements of the implementation grant for that third-party match, because that will really be the key to getting this accomplished. So I'm open and happy to have those conversations. Katya is open and happy to have those conversations.
And Brandon Johnson is as well, so mm-hmm. Give us all a call, maybe not at the same time, but we can even organize that if you want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to thank you all for being here today and for being with us through this past year of NextGen Consortium activities. And please let me know if you have any questions in the next couple of weeks as you're wrapping up your white paper and thinking through next steps. And I know Katya is also available for that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and I wanted to tell you, I mean, not everyone's on the line, but this is a thing now. It's so great,
Yeah.
and you are making this happen. And, you know, Maureen and I are a little bit on the circuit. We're at AHA and MLA, and we're talking to different people at foundations and all over the country about what's happening. And you are in a really wonderful vanguard and are doing really, really wonderful work. And I am so happy that you've been a part of this, and want to thank you all.
Yes, thank you. So goodbye for now.